Every single homeowner has stood in their driveway, staring down a crack in the concrete, and asked the same question. Do I really need to hire someone for this, or can I fix it myself with something from the hardware store? I've heard every answer under the sun. Caulk it, patch it, seal it, ignore it, and pray. So I decided to stop guessing and actually test it. 3 different repair methods, on 3 identical cracks, cut into the same slab, exposed to the same weather, the same freeze-thaw cycles, the same foot traffic. No shortcuts, no sponsor telling me which product to praise. Just concrete, time, and the truth. And what I found out is going to save some of you a lot of money, and it's going to make others of you furious, because you already paid a contractor for the method that failed first. Let's get into it. Before we touch a single crack, you need to understand why concrete cracks in the first place, because that's the whole key to why most repairs fail. Concrete is basically a rock that's poured as a liquid. As it cures, it shrinks. As the ground underneath it shifts with moisture and temperature, it flexes. Concrete has almost no flexibility of its own, so when the slab beneath it moves even a few millimeters, something has to give, and that something is your driveway, your sidewalk, your garage floor. A crack isn't really damage in the way a scratch on a car is damage, it's a stress relief valve. And that matters, because if you don't understand that, you'll pick a repair that fights the movement instead of working with it. And it will fail, every time. For this test, I found 3 cracks of nearly identical width, about a 1/4 inch, on an older slab that's been through at least a decade of seasons. Same slab, same sun exposure, same drainage. I marked them crack A, crack B, and crack C, and I gave each one a completely different treatment. Method 1 is the one almost every homeowner reaches for first, because it's cheap, it's fast, and it's sitting right there in the concrete aisle. A squeeze tube of concrete crack sealant, the kind that looks like caulk and gets applied with a caulking gun. I want to be fair here. This stuff isn't garbage. It's designed for hairline cracks, cosmetic touch-ups, keeping water from seeping in on something under 1/8 of an inch wide. But contractors will tell you off the record that this is the make it look nice for the open house fix, not a structural repair. I cleaned the crack with a wire brush, blew out the dust with compressed air. And that step matters more than people think. Because caulk that goes over dust and debris is basically gluing itself to loose particles instead of solid concrete. And I ran a clean bead down the length of the crack, tooled it smooth with a putty knife, and let it cure for the manufacturer's recommended 24 hours. Method 2 steps it up a level. A vinyl concrete patching compound, the kind that comes as a powder you mix with water into a thick paste, or a pre-mixed tub. This is what most big box stores market as the real fix. Trowel it in, feather the edges, and it bonds to the surrounding concrete as it cures. This is genuinely a step above caulk, because it's got actual compressive strength, and once it's cured, it looks and feels like the surrounding slab. A lot of contractors use a version of this for surface-level spalling and shallow cracks. I widened the crack slightly with a chisel. That's called chasing the crack, and it gives the patch material something to mechanically grip instead of just sitting on top. Vacuumed it out, wetted the surrounding concrete so it wouldn't pull moisture out of my patch too fast, mixed the compound to the exact ratio on the bag, and packed it in tight with a margin trowel, working it deep so there were no air pockets. Smoothed it flush, and let it cure. Method 3 is the one almost nobody tries at home, because it sounds intimidating. A 2-part polyurethane crack injection system. This is closer to what foundation repair companies actually use on structural cracks, and it works completely differently from the first 2 methods. Instead of just filling the gap from the surface, you're injecting a flexible polymer resin under pressure, deep into the crack, so it bonds through the entire depth of the slab, not just the visible face. Here's the part that surprised me the first time I researched this. Polyurethane expands as it cures and actually pushes itself into every microfracture branching off the main crack, ones you can't even see with the naked eye. And critically, this is the contractor secret nobody tells you. Polyurethane stays flexible after it cures. It doesn't fight the concrete's natural movement. It moves with it. I installed injection ports along the crack every few inches, sealed the surface between the ports with a fast-set epoxy paste gel so the resin wouldn't leak out sideways. And once that surface seal cured, I used a 2-part cartridge gun to inject the polyurethane resin port by port, working from the bottom up, watching for it to weep out of the port above before moving on. That's how you know the crack is actually filling, not just the surface. Once cured, I cut the ports flush and cleaned the surface. Now here's where most videos on this topic completely lie to you. They show you the repair fresh, looking perfect, and cut to the credits. That tells you absolutely nothing, because every single one of these 3 methods looks great on day 1. The real test is what happens after a full cycle of expansion, contraction, rain, and temperature swings. So I waited. I let all 3 repairs sit through repeated hot afternoons, cold nights, a heavy rainstorm, and regular foot and vehicle traffic over the area, checking in at set intervals instead of just once. Crack A, the caulk tube, was the first to show trouble. Around the 2-week mark, hairline separation started appearing right at the edges. Not a new crack, but the sealant literally pulling away from the original crack wall on one side. By the time we hit a full month, with temperatures swinging between a cold morning and a hot afternoon, you could see daylight starting to peek through at one section. The problem is exactly what I warned about earlier. This product is rated for surface sealing on tiny cracks, not for a 1/4-inch crack that's still actively moving. It never had a chance. It's not a bad product. It's the wrong product for this job. Crack B, the vinyl patching compound, held up considerably better. No visible separation at the edges, the surface stayed flush, and it actually took the weight of vehicle traffic without crumbling. But here's the catch, and it's the same catch that trips up every homeowner who trusts a rigid patch. Right next to the original repair, a new hairline crack appeared, branching off at almost a 90-degree angle. The patch material itself didn't fail, but it's rigid, so instead of moving with the slab, it forced the stress somewhere else. The slab found a new place to crack, because the old crack could no longer flex. This is the repair that looks like a win for the first month, and then quietly creates a second problem a few months later. Crack C, the polyurethane injection, is the one that actually lasted. No separation at the edges, no branching cracks nearby, no visible movement at the surface at all, because the resin filled the entire depth of the crack and flexed along with the slab instead of resisting it. Where the caulk failed from lack of depth, and the vinyl patch failed by transferring stress elsewhere, the polyurethane succeeded because it did the one thing concrete actually needs. It moved with the material instead of against it. And this lines up exactly with why foundation and structural repair companies use this method on cracks that actually matter. It's not marketing, it's material science. A flexible bond beats a rigid bond every time the substrate underneath is still shifting, which, on virtually every residential slab, it always is. If you take one thing away from this test, take this. Match the repair to the crack, not to what's cheapest or most convenient. A hairline crack under 1/8 of an inch, purely cosmetic, not moving. Caulk sealant is genuinely fine for that, and you'd be wasting money doing an injection. But the moment you're dealing with a crack a 1/4 inch or wider, especially one that's active, meaning it changes slightly with the seasons, a rigid patch is a temporary fix wearing a costume. It will look done, it will not be done. And the injection method, while it takes more setup and a bit more cost up front, is the only one of the 3 that's actually solving the underlying problem instead of hiding it. Here's the part contractors don't love talking about. A caulk tube costs you next to nothing, but you'll be redoing it every single season, and each redo is time and product cost stacking up. The vinyl patch costs more up front and looks like a real fix, until it creates that secondary crack, which then needs its own repair. And now you've paid for 2 jobs instead of 1. The injection kit costs more than both of the others combined on day 1. But it's the only method in this test that, months later, required 0 follow-up. When you actually add up the real cost, including the redo work, the expensive option ends up being the cheapest one over time. That's the part nobody wants to admit when they're standing in the store aisle trying to save $20. So if you've got a hairline crack you just want to keep water out of, grab the caulk, it'll do its job. But if you've got a real moving 1/4 inch plus crack in your driveway, your garage floor, or your foundation, do not let anyone, including your own instinct to save money, talk you into a rigid patch. Do it once. Do it with something that flexes with your slab, and you will never have to think about that crack again. If this test saved you from making a mistake I've watched 100 homeowners make, do me a favor and subscribe. Because next week I'm testing whether those, as seen on TV, driveway sealers are actually worth it, or if they're just another product designed to look good in a 30-second commercial and fail in the real world. Drop a comment and tell me which crack repair you've tried and whether it held up. I read every single one. See you in the next video.